David glared at the plate of seemingly empty pasta with obvious distaste. "Dinner," Sophia, his wife, said with an unruffled tone. "This is what you call dinner? I'm a man. I need meat." David snapped back. "We don't have money for meat," Sophia explained, trying to soothe him, but her tone only seemed to stoke his anger further. "Where did the money go? Did you waste it all on nails and scraps again? I handed you my paycheck not long ago." Sophia glanced at her nails, which hadn't seen polish in ages, and sighed before responding calmly. "First of all, you gave me your salary 3 weeks ago, and it was all used for groceries. I've been covering the utility bills and the loan from my own earnings. I haven't bought any scraps for myself." "Oh, sure. I believe you," David retorted sarcastically. Sophia, exhausted by the endless arguments and her husband's dissatisfaction, silently began eating. She was worn out by the constant lack of money and her husband's refusal to find a better-paying job. "You have to work harder if you want to earn more," David shouted. "Do I have to work like a horse from dawn till dusk? You should cut back on those salons." "Well, I'm juggling 2 jobs, though I'm no horse either," Sophia replied quietly. "What kind of work is that? Sitting around all day, sharpening your lies with the same people as you. That's not real work. You could work 3 shifts in a job like that. Then find one yourself, sit around, do nothing, and get paid." Sophia had some savings tucked away, but she was saving them for a new coat, not because she wanted a new one, but because she was embarrassed to wear the old one to work. She patched it up as best as she could, mending the fabric, sewing on buttons, and adding a few patches, but it was still clear it was time to retire it. Nevertheless, the next day Sophia went to the store and bought a chicken, using her savings to do so. "It's fine," she reassured herself. "They promised a bonus this month. I'll add that to the savings." David was unimpressed with the chicken. He looked at the meal his wife had prepared with disdain and left the table in silence, clearly unwilling to eat what he considered a poor excuse for food. Instead, he stopped by his mother's house after work, where he ate, claiming his wife had spent all the money on a manicure, leaving nothing to eat at home. His mother shook her head in disapproval, lamenting that her son had ended up with such a spender. She served him a rich borscht, which she had made in bulk, hoping it would last her the week. The old woman had scrimped and saved as much as she could, with rising medicine costs forcing her to choose between food and treatment. On payday, David gave his wife only half of the money. "I need a new winter jacket," he insisted. "I've been making do with this one for 2 years. That's enough." "Is it fair that I've been wearing the same coat for 5 years?" Sophia shot back. "Well, you choose. Either nail salons or a new coat," David declared as he walked out. "And what about the loan? And the utility bills? Who's paying for those?" Sophia demanded. "Is there a lot of utility bill? You take a look." "Great. What do I look like? A woman who checks bills." Sophia broke down in tears. Goodbye, new coat. But David didn't even glance at her tears, retreating silently into the bedroom. "Stop being hysterical. Just warm up my dinner," he shouted from the other room. The next day at work, Sophia was a bundle of nerves. Everything seemed to slip through her fingers. After lunch, her boss, Carter, called her into his office. "Sophia, you seem off today. Are you having any problems?" Carter inquired. "No," Sophia replied softly, though tears betrayed her composure. "All right, let's take a moment. Here, have some water," Carter said, pouring a glass from a decanter on the table and handing it to her. He waited for her to take a few sips before urging her. "Now, tell me what's going on." Feeling utterly spent, Sophia poured out her troubles. She could no longer maintain the facade of everything being fine. "Do you have children?" Carter asked after listening to her. "No, I don't dare," Sophia admitted. "That's probably for the best with a husband like yours. But I can help you out," Carter said, gently stroking her hand as she looked at him in alarm. "There's an old dormitory from our factory. It's not luxurious, but it's livable. One of our employees recently moved out after getting married. I can give you a referral to stay there. Just don't take too long to decide. I have others who need it too." "Thank you, Carter, but I don't know if it's necessary." Sophia started, wiping her tears. Don't refuse right away. Think it over for a week or so, Carter said, studying her closely. Now get back to work. David continued to ignore his wife, preferring to have dinner at his mother's house after work. Sophia tried to make amends, even using the rest of her savings to buy some chops. But David bypassed the kitchen with a dismissive attitude. That night, while Sophia slept, he sneaked in and took half of the meat from the tray. Sophia noticed the missing meat but stayed silent, hoping it might lead to some reconciliation. Just before lunch, Carter burst into the room where Sophia and her colleagues were working. Girls, I need help. We need to get samples of our products to potential clients immediately. The two other women exchanged glances, quickly concocting excuses and claiming they were too busy. Sophia decided to step in. Carter, let me handle it, she volunteered, rising from her desk. The clients were impressed with the samples and promised to place a substantial order. But what stood out to Sophia was one particular client who complimented not just the products but her as well. He even walked her to the exit of the building. Sophia, would you be interested in meeting again sometime? He asked, then added quickly, on business, of course. Come by our factory, Sophia replied with a smile. Feeling buoyed by the positive interaction, she made her way to the bus stop. As she approached, she spotted David entering a cafe with another man. Curious, she drew closer and read the sign on the door. Through the large window, she saw her husband devouring a hearty meal with evident enjoyment. Determined to uncover where her husband had gotten the money for his cafe lunch, Sophia walked into the restaurant and made her way to the table where David was seated. To avoid a commotion, she decided to listen in on their conversation first. Perhaps this man was treating David out of gratitude for something. She slipped into a seat behind a small partition, hoping to overhear. The ribs are fantastic today, the stranger remarked. Yeah, David agreed, but the salad was a letdown. It needs more dressing and salt. It's perfect for me. I don't know. You're just being picky. The man chuckled. Have you forgotten what your wife serves you for dinner? And now I don't even have dinner at home, David boasted. Why are you eating out then? No, I'm going to my mother's. She knows how to feed a man. I can't afford to eat out twice a day. And isn't Sophia curious about why you give her so little money? She thinks my salary is still what it was 2 years ago. She has no need to know how much I make. Soon, I won't give her any money at all. I'm done with her and what she expects from me. And if she leaves, who cares? She's not worth anything. Sophia felt a surge of rage and heartbreak. How could he speak about her like that, especially when she was sacrificing so much? She wiped away the tears that had started to fall and stood up from her hiding place. That's where you're wrong, David. I'm leaving you and filing for divorce, she declared. David quickly composed himself, facing his wife with a smirk. See, what did I tell you? He said to his companion. Not only does she look like a beggar and can't cook, but she's also hysterical. I'm sick of her tantrums. David's voice was loud and cutting as he shouted this at Sophia. Do you know why I look like a beggar? Sophia addressed the curious cafe patrons who were watching the scene unfold. Because he spends his salary on his mistress. Meanwhile, I use my money, earned from 2 jobs, to pay the bills, the loan, and buy food for this so-called handsome man. And he's eating his elderly mother's food, not considering that her pension is meager and she's sacrificing her own well-being to feed him. I'm leaving you. With that, Sophia turned on her heel and walked out, leaving a heavy silence in her wake. Hysterical. David shouted after her, but she didn't look back. Actually, David, the man across from him said, you can't deny it. Your wife spends all her money on necessities, while you squander yours on cafes and clothes. And it's not right to let your old mother feed you when you're not contributing to her support. You're also cheating on your wife. David tried to justify himself. Who are you listening to? This guy. I'm not just listening. I can see that everything she said is true. Sorry, but I can't sit at the same table with you, the man said, tossing some bills onto the table before leaving. David, seething with anger, thought, you'll pay for this. He barely managed to wait until the end of the workday before rushing home. Sophia, He shouted as he entered the apartment, but there was no response. David, still in his work clothes, searched the living room and bedroom. Sophia was nowhere to be found. Panic set in as he opened the closet and found her belongings missing. He dashed to the kitchen. Empty. Only the apartment keys remained on the dining table. "Fine. Let's see how long you last without me." David fumed, clenching his fists. "You'll come crawling back sooner or later." Sophia twirled in front of the mirror, reveling in her new wardrobe. Since leaving David, she had found herself with a bit of extra cash that she had been saving. Today, as she deposited another portion of her salary into her savings box, she discovered a surprisingly substantial stack of bills. Sophia counted the money, then sank onto the bed in astonishment. Her new coat was now a reality, and the new boots were a delightful bonus. Surprised? Avery, her roommate, laughed. "Do you think Santa Claus dropped it off?" "Oh, I don't even know what to think." Sophia whispered in disbelief. "What's there to think about?" Avery replied. "We don't pay much for the hostel. You don't have any loans anymore. You only have yourself to feed, and you eat like a bird. It adds up. Even with just one job, you'd manage fine. But you're working too, so it's no surprise." Sophia and Avery went shopping at the mall, where Sophia chose a coat and boots. They then celebrated their purchases with ice cream at a cafe. "Is Charles coming today?" Avery asked with a mischievous grin, savoring her third serving of ice cream. Charles was the client who had shown interest in Sophia after she brought him samples. Initially, she had been hesitant about his advances, but Avery had encouraged her to give him a chance. "Let him prove that not all men are like David," Avery had said. Today was supposed to be their third date. They usually took walks in the park, as Sophia was shy about her new clothes. But today she was ready to accept his invitation to a cafe. Meanwhile, David sat gloomily, poking at a plate of sticky pasta. His pockets were empty. In the first month after Sophia left, he continued his old ways, relieved not to have to give her any money. But a month later, he received an alarming call. "Your loan payment is overdue. Penalties have accrued, and we expect payment soon." Furious, David called Sophia to vent. "The loan was taken out in your name, and the item you bought with it is still in your possession. So why should I be responsible for paying it?" Sophia replied calmly before ending the call. Soon, David's loan debt was compounded by overdue utility bills. He hadn't bothered to check who was paying them, and they were surprisingly high, given his tendency to leave lights and water running. With no other options, David used his salary to settle his debts, leaving him nearly broke. He went to his mother's house, only to find she was in the hospital. She had spent nearly all her pension on food for him, neglecting her own health and medications, which led to her hospitalization. Dining at his mother's house was no longer an option. With his last bit of money, David bought the cheapest pasta he could find and tried to stretch it out until his next paycheck, all while cursing Sophia. After a week of this monotonous diet, David could no longer stomach the pasta. To distract himself from his hunger, he decided to take a walk. On his day off, he wandered the streets, watching townsfolk enjoying cafes and restaurants. As he passed by one eatery, he caught sight of his ex-wife. She looked happier and more vibrant, laughing with a well-dressed man. David spun around and hurried back home, where his cold, unappetizing pasta awaited him.